Welcome everyone to the Community IT webinar series. Today we will be talking about IT planning for disasters, presented by with Johan Hammerstrom and Matthew Eshleman. Some tips for the webinar: as chats, interact and focus, avoid multitasking. You may miss the best part, and as always, our PowerPoint and recording links will be shared after the webinar. This is actually a re-recording of the webinar due to some technical issues with our platform. That should be all sorted out, so enjoy this re-recording of the webinar. So first off, about Community IT, we are a partner with nonprofits to help solve strategic and day-to-day IT challenges. We've worked with over 900 nonprofits since 1993 and have a real deep understanding of the issues that nonprofits face and the technology solutions that are appropriate in the sector. We take a strategic approach to the technology solutions that we implement, taking a broad view to make sure that we're recommending the best solution. We're collaborative. We have a team of almost 40 staff, or over 40 staff, who are empowering you to make IT choices, and we're committed to supporting your mission to take care of IT as if it were our own. We're happy to co-present this webinar today with MAP TECHWORKS. MAP TECHWORKS is a program of MAP for nonprofits based in Minneapolis. So they're a great organization. We got to know them a bit last year at the N10 conference in Minneapolis, and are really happy to have them co-present or partner with us for this webinar today. They do free trainings like this one. They do email support, have video interviews with smart people like my colleague Johan on their website, and you can check that out at maptechworks.org. So the folks that put this presentation together, Johan Hammerstrom, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Community IT. You can contact him via email or follow him on Twitter. My name is Matthew Eshleman, and I'm the Chief Technical Officer at Community IT. And again, I'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions that you may have as part of this webinar. My email address is meshleman@communityit.com, and you can also follow me on Twitter at @meshleman. So today we're going to be talking about IT planning for disasters. So we're going to go through kind of 4 top-level steps where we'll be talking about kind of the context of how it fits into business continuity. We'll talk about concepts and terms. I think this is particularly relevant as you're having these discussions with other folks in your organization and trying to make this a topic that's not necessarily so tech-heavy or kind of daunting from that perspective. So just want to make sure that that we've got some concepts and terms down. We'll be talking about an inventory of your data. So essentially what we're talking about is protecting an organization's assets. So we'll talk a little bit about some ways to go about that, and then finally wrap up with some technical solutions to get into some of the specifics on how one might go about protecting data in different scenarios. So I think first off, it's important to recognize that information is an asset. So, just as your finance department is, very conscientious, and there's lots of controls and procedures around making sure that your financial data is protected and accurate and verified, the rest of the organizational data should have that same degree of care and attention. And, the success of many organizations is really dependent on good quality data, having access to that information, and making sure that it's well protected. And whenever that data asset is not managed, then you introduce a lot of risk. If you don't know where your data systems are, if they're not well protected, if they're not well managed, then the organization is at risk for not being able to execute on its mission, because instead of finding and acting on the organization's data assets, maybe the issue is trying to find it or locate it or recover it if it's walked off with on somebody's laptop. So information is an asset, and I think that's a key point to keep in mind as we talk about this context of IT planning for disasters. So first off, we'll talk about the kind of the business continuity context. So business continuity is really the top level kind of term or concept that that disaster recovery falls into. I like to think of disaster recovery as kind of a bottom-up approach. So if you're in the IT department, or maybe if you're in the operations, you can really kind of drive a disaster recovery process because you're really focusing on kind of just the systems, the IT resources. Business continuity is kind of a much broader context. It's often driven by the board, but that's looking at kind of the organization in its entirety, how it can continue to function, in the event of a number of different scenarios. So business continuity context is kind of that which is required to maintain continuing operations and organizational viability. So, how is the organization going to continue to operate, continue to function, execute on its mission, in the event of, a pandemic or, significant, natural disaster or something, catastrophic that happens to the building that affects, lots of people. So business continuity is a much kind of broader topic and looks at how can you continue to operate in the face of kind of operational uncertainty. So as I mentioned, business continuity, the planning process around that, there's really key elements around leadership, the staff, the systems, which is what we'll dig into a little bit in the disaster recovery side of things, program delivery, and then the back office, internal operations and facilities. So again, this is business continuity is really often driven by the board. We've recently gone through a business continuity process ourselves at Community IT, and that was at the behest of our board, and it was actually led by our CFO. So it wasn't an IT-led initiative. There certainly were IT initiatives that were part of the business continuity plan, but actually, quite a bit of the business continuity plan was around kind of staff, engagement, program delivery. What happens in the event of certain leadership issues. So there's lots of other pieces that go into business continuity, and that's kind of that top-down approach. So it's a holistic effort, that really involves the entire organization. As I said, we went through this process recently because our board, the governance committee, said, this is really something that we need to have in place to ensure that we can continue to meet our mission, serve our clients, in the event of uncertainty that we are going to face as an organization. So now we'll talk about some of the concepts and terms. So we've talked about business continuity. We'll dig into that disaster recovery, understanding our data retention requirements, and then digging into these technical concepts of RTO, RPO, uptime, and some others. So often whenever you get into these conversations, it's helpful to have a common set of definitions to help make sure everybody's on the same page whenever we're talking about what these different things mean in terms of getting our data or backing it up or protecting it. So again, business continuity is really about continuing to operate. How can the organization operate if the primary data system is unavailable? Asking that question, how long can we be down? So how long can we continue to operate if we don't have access to our IT systems, maybe to our staffing systems, to our building? So it can take on a number of meanings, but fundamentally you're asking the question, how long can we be down? And often it's the sensational, can we continue to function in the event of, a fire, earthquake, maybe if you're in California, this is a higher priority issue, a flood, on the East Coast. Certainly the Hurricane Sandy last year, 2 years ago, was a big, raised a lot of these business continuity issues whenever you couldn't get access to the building, you couldn't get access to your servers. As an organization, how can you continue to operate if your servers are waterlogged or you can't get access to your system? Civil unrest, this may be more applicable to perhaps some international organizations, maybe here in the U.S. as well. But for civil unrest, it's not safe to get to the office. Communication is down. How do we function in that? Sabotage, deliberate, non-deliberate. I think security. This could be an increasingly visible topic, or others. I mean, there's really a laundry list of scenarios that one could consider when you're looking at the business continuity context. And so these are, I think, the kind of the attention-grabbing items. I think from our perspective, we're based in Washington, D.C. We certainly see, weather-related events are probably the biggest impactor to business continuity. It can be something as basic as, we've had a lot of snowstorms in D.C. this past year, and it impacted people's ability to get to the office. It impacted their ability to do work because they needed to, take off to do childcare. How can we continue to serve our clients whenever half of our staff is kind of homebound, not able to get to the office? How can we continue to function in those events? But there's often things that are a lot less exciting or maybe less attention getting that have a big impact as well. Power outage, internet outage, carelessness. Somebody does an improper data load or delete some data that they shouldn't have. Maybe there's catastrophic hardware failure. There's training issues. Somebody doesn't kind of enter data correctly or do something in the right manner. Or what else? Business continuity can really encompass some things that aren't very kind of exciting or maybe attention grabbing, but really do have a big impact. So power outage. One of our clients had Pepco here in DC had some major electrical issues, and their building was out of power within for I think 3 days. And so for them, that just wasn't acceptable, and led them to rethink their business continuity plan, because being down for 3 days just it was just too much. And again, it was nothing. Their servers were fine; they were all just sitting there in the office. But again, they couldn't come. Staff couldn't come to the office, and then they couldn't power on the servers to do their work. So no email, no files, no databases. So that was all impacted by the fact that their building didn't have any power, and that was very little that they could do about that. So disaster recovery is, I think, looking much more at the term of so once something does happen, can you recover from that loss of information or disruption to service? So business continuity looks at how long could we be down for. Disaster recovery is really focused on how quickly must or can we restore access to that information. So while business continuity is kind of focusing on that maybe uptime and availability question, which we'll talk about a little bit later, disaster recovery is so once data has been lost, how quickly can we recover that information? Data retention kind of often gets thrown into this as we're looking at building a kind of a backup disaster recovery and business continuity plan, because it helps to inform questions about retention. How long do we need to keep things around? I think we can all think back on our backup tapes. How long do those backup tapes need to sit on the shelf before they can be overwritten? How far back do we need to go? And again, different data assets may require different retention periods. And this is a bit different than, so this is asking the question, how far back do we need to go? Or if I delete something today, what's my time period that I would like to be able to recover that data? So, some people say, forever. That gets to be kind of expensive, but I think what we're seeing is that most organizations are okay for 90 days to a year for email files, perhaps maybe a little bit longer for financial information. It is difficult to make that decision to say we want to we're going to let things go after X amount of time. So it's important to understand your requirements. Maybe there's some compliance issues that you face as an organization where you need to retain certain information, whether it be email, health information. So those external requirements can really have a big impact in terms of what you can do as an organization in terms of your data retention policies. So when talking about these, disaster recovery, recovery point objective, that RPO acronym talked about, the point in time from which data can be restored, is basically answering the question, how much data can I afford to lose? Can I afford to lose an hour's worth of work, a day's worth of work, or maybe a week's worth of work? Typically, in a best case scenario, our stereotypical tape backup that runs, once a night, that would give you a 24-hour or a 1-day RPO, because data is backed up at a point in time. at night, and so if somebody deletes something, or the server crashes, at 9 o'clock, the backups are set to run at 9:30. You're gonna your recovery point is going to be in a best case scenario 9:30 from the previous day. And again, that's pending all the backups are running well, and often that that doesn't necessarily happen. So we're kind of talking about best case scenario. So it could be that tape backup a day or two is kind of your recovery point objective. Recovery time objective is that time that's required to recover the data. So answering the question, how long can my data be unavailable? So again, with the tape backup example, you're backing up once once a day, so you have a 24-hour RPO, and for recovering a single file from a day or so ago, maybe that recovery time for a single file is half an hour to an hour. Maybe it's a folder, it takes a bit longer. If you're recovering data from 3 months ago, that recovery time might be longer because you need to go to the bank to get the tapes out of the safety deposit box, or you need to bring it back from your house. So that may take a bit longer. So it's just important, I think, to help put some of these terms and I think specific hours and metrics around them, so that you can help move the discussion beyond it being kind of the technical discussion around which backup software you're using or which backup method you're using, to really focusing on what's the business requirement to help bring the discussion up and engage a broader section of the organization. So this should be ideally something that while IT can inform, is really a business decision that kind of company leadership is really having a discussion around and making decisions around. So it's important that you're using common metrics that can be easily understood and identified, and kind of walk through those specific examples of okay, we delete a file, what happens? We delete a whole folder, what happens? Somebody deletes their entire mailbox, what happens in that case? To go through that whole process. Again, with some of the additional definitions, we talked about uptime, and I think this is something that that we're seeing kind of more and more often, particularly as the prevalence of the cloud becomes kind of more and more a viable option for organizations. Looking at this question of uptime, so that expectation of access to data. The 5 nines is something you may hear. That's what's often termed quote unquote carrier grade, which would be less than it's like 5 or 6 minutes of unexpected downtime over the course of a year. So that's basically, if you think back to your old landline telephone, it didn't matter what happened. The power is out. Fire, flood, hellfire and brimstone. You could pick up your phone and get a dial tone. So that was 5 nines. It was always up. Often with the cloud-based services, you'll see a 99.9% uptime as their service level agreement, or SLA, and that translates into about 8 hours of unanticipated downtime per year. It's also important to understand the distinction between the unanticipated downtime per year and then scheduled maintenance. So often in the contracts it will say they will give as much notice as they can, but they may need to call for some scheduled maintenance on short notice, and that doesn't count against that uptime SLA. There's also organizations that or groups that will have 100% uptime SLA. I think while it's it looks impressive once you peel back the layers, it can be a bit misleading, a bit of a sales job, since it's I would say it's impossible to have that 100% uptime, and often the remediation or the recourse that you would have if the system is down, for a cloud-based service that you're maybe spending $100 or a few $100s a month, is going to be pretty minimal. So they'll often have you kind of self-report, kind of calculate and request the downtime that you have experienced as an organization, and then they'll look at the number of users affected and multiply it by the number of hours over the course that represents over the course of a month, and so you may get a few percent back which might be equal to or less than the amount of time that you had to spend to kind of track that down. So, not saying it's not a good thing to have a high uptime, but just recognize that maybe some of the appeal of that 100% uptime is diminished once you actually look at, well, what would it mean to actually recoup that service level credit that they would provide. Again, we're talking about retention, how much data is retained over time and how frequently. So this can look at, we're talking about, what's the data retention period, how long are you going to keep data around. So not necessarily how long do you want to be able to recover after it's been deleted, but as an organization, do you purge data after X, years, months? For some organizations, they only retain 30 days worth of email, and they kind of purge everything after that because perhaps they're subject to subpoenas, and they they don't need to retain their email, and so they just kind of get rid of it because it's subject to discovery. For financial information, obviously, that needs to be retained, in some cases for 7 years, in some cases in perpetuity, and so after that point, you can kind of purge data out of the system. And then we're also looking at, I would say specifically, for the cloud and also, for your own organization's IT systems, looking at the concept of geo-redundancy. So basically, is your data in just one place? So you would often want to have it in at least one other place, and perhaps two. And it's also important to understand that just because your data is in the cloud doesn't necessarily mean that you're automatically geo-redundant. So for example, if you're using Amazon for some of your cloud services, perhaps you have some virtual servers in their EC2 environment. That's still a geographic area. So while Amazon gives you the ability to have multiple geographic locations, by default it's not automatic. So if there's a problem in the Northern Virginia region of EC2 and your servers are impacted there, unless you've kind of pre-designed replication to other regions and built in that redundancy, you're still kind of just have your data in one place. So geographic redundancy is important. I think specifically if you're a larger organization, to have that broader footprint so that if something happens in one area, you can continue to provide services, resources from another data center location. So just because you're in the cloud doesn't mean it's automatically geo redundant. Here's the chart that really kind of digs into those the 5 nines. I think this was pulled from Wikipedia. So you can see that the 5 nines is at carrier grade, about 5.5 minutes of unanticipated downtime per year. 3 nines would be your less than 9 hours of unanticipated downtime per year. And I would say most organizations, if you would kind of critically look at, if you're doing backup in-house, you don't have kind of spare equipment lying around, you're probably in that, 95% uptime or availability in terms of, if something did happen catastrophically to your data, being out, 2 to 3 weeks is not an outside possibility. If you calculate the time that it would take to, if you have an in-house server to purchase and ship a new server, to get a new backup tape, to reinstall everything, to recover that data, that's recovering within 2 weeks is kind of, that would be our expectation for an organization that has a single server, single site environment with tape backup going off site. Your recovery, your uptime is about 95%. So you could expect to be down for up to 18 days if something really catastrophic happened. So I think it's important to have those metrics around so you can have the conversation with company leadership to say, okay, what is our tolerance for downtime? Where do we need to go? Because obviously, these different levels of availability often carry different costs. I think the nice thing about a lot of these cloud services is that you kind of automatically get some built-in business continuity because they're taking advantage of scale to be able to provide highly redundant availability solutions in multiple zones, and you can kind of automatically get some business continuity just by moving your data or your email into Office 365 or moving your email to Google Apps. So that's a great thing about the cloud. Great benefit is that you kind of automatically can kind of buy yourself some business continuity without having to build it all yourself. With sophisticated hardware and software and services. So as we put it all together, business continuity is really that top-level topic, and underneath it, we've got the disaster recovery framework in terms of how frequently are we backing up the data and how quickly can we get it back, coupled with this concept around availability or kind of uptime and access to that information. So what's my threshold for systems being down, and then how long do I need to retain information? So I think when you put it all together, it can help provide a much more comprehensive picture and help inform some of those business decisions that really need to be made at the leadership table in terms of what are our tolerances for all these different areas. So once you understand those terms, then it's important, as I talked about at the beginning of the session, to really treat your information as an asset. So list out all of your data, identify those uptime, retention, RTO and RPO requirements for each of those assets. And again, this is a business decision that the organization needs to make. IT can really be involved to help kind of define things, but it's in the framework of helping the other business units understand what the current systems are. I think often there's a misperception that whatever IT is kind of taking care of it, and everything is backed up and available all the time. I can get everything that I need, but that's just not the case unless there's been an intentional plan around providing that level of service. So it's good to have these discussions, put it down on paper. Don't talk about the technical details, but instead talk about hours, uptime, downtime, what we're going to do if this scenario happens, and really have an open conversation about that. So one thing we like to do is just a basic table to really identify those primary systems, maybe some secondary systems, and then the different uptime, retention, RTO and RPO requirements around each one of those. So often, email is very important for organizations. Maybe it doesn't have as long of a retention period. So if we, delete something, if it's important, we'll realize it before 3 months is up. But if a system goes down, we can't afford to lose more than an hour's worth of email, and we really need it back within 30 minutes. So that can help drive some of those decisions in terms of, what email system do we need to move to that can give us that level of RTO and RPO. Again, financial systems, often they may not have as rigorous of an uptime requirement, but again, the retention time is longer. Maybe the RTO can be a bit longer. RPO can stretch a little bit. So you can just see that it's a good model to go through, just understand, put some metrics around what are our most valuable, most important systems. Maybe grant proposals is your most important system that the organization really, really needs to function. And so, that system just can't be down at all. And then also recognizing that there's secondary systems, media files. We see this a lot with digital assets that, there's just this huge volume of data, pictures, more and more video, where, just requires a fantastic amount of storage, but it's pretty static. It doesn't get accessed all that often. And so, if for some reason, that data is not available for a few days, life can go on, but, it still needs to be protected. And so that probably requires a different protection method than whatever you're using to, back up or make available your financial system or your email system. And again, finally, those legacy databases, they can, your legacy accounting package or your legacy CRM, you may need to have it around for some historical reference, but, really if you had to, bring it out of storage or, convert it to a virtual machine and fire it up, it took a week, that would be tolerable. So it's just great to go through and really frame out, what those requirements are for the different systems. Now that we're kind of have our data matrix, then we can talk about some of the technical solutions ranging kind of across the whole range of options here. So I would say first off, you've got what I would call availability solutions. Kind of maybe starting at the bottom here. There's a number of third-party high availability software solutions that will kind of replicate your systems if they're on-prem in their entirety. So maybe you want to replicate your email server, your custom database application server. You can replicate that to maybe a colo facility or some other hosted solution, because you really need that system to be up, and you can do failover between them. So we've used Double Take as an option that we've used. It's very sophisticated software. It's pretty expensive, but it really does meet that business requirement of, we need to fail over a server and kind of be up and running within 30 minutes. You can do that no problem. There's a number of other solutions in this area. Microsoft really provides some of this kind of built-in within its products. Active Directory is kind of replicates amongst servers. So if you're an organization that has multiple sites, you may have a server in each location. That server often is going to have a copy of the Active Directory, which is the login information, and so you can get access to that. If one site's down, people can still log in. People can still access their computers through that authentication method. Microsoft, the Exchange has a kind of a feature called the Database Availability Group, which allows you to have kind of multiple site replication that gives you server and site redundancy or resiliency if a server fails, site fails, you can continue to get email. And these are kind of solutions where we see them on the higher end clients that are maybe 150 staff on up with some on-premise Exchange environments. Most folks are now moving that to the cloud because the kind of the cost and the management time savings is pretty significant. And Microsoft then will also do DFS, distributed file system, as a way to move files from point A to point B. And again, cloud-based storage, that's something where you can replicate things to Amazon, to Azure, and then get that data in a bunch of different places. Makes it very easy. I would say tape. That's been my go-to example. I would say at this point it's a pretty legacy solution. It's rather expensive. It's difficult to manage. Typically your RPO is about a day if everything is working well, and often there's issues. It requires a fair amount of kind of babysitting and hand-holding to make it work. Your recovery time is at least an hour, sometimes longer, kind of depending on where that data is. Again, you're often in a situation where you're backing up fulls on the weekends and maybe incrementals during the week, and so it can just take a long time to get that data back. What we are seeing in larger organizations that still have tape is that often that's then being coupled with local backup to disk, and then that data is then moved to tape, and then tape is taken off-site. I mean, the one thing tape I think still has going for it is that it's probably the cheapest method for your kind of data retention, storing large amounts of data off-site. So there still may be a role for it. I think it's shrinking. So we haven't been doing a lot of tape backups, I don't know, for the last 3 or 4 years. We still do see it out there to some extent, but it's usually in pretty specific situations. Most of the things that we've been doing, I would say probably for the last 4 years or so, has been around image backup. Image backup, instead of tape, where you're or kind of your traditional backup system where you're backing up the files and folders, with image backups you're backing up the entire system. This has the benefit of really dropping your recovery time, because instead of restoring files one by one, you can kind of take a picture of the whole server and then recover that. It also gives you the ability to have a much quicker RPO, so you can snapshot the server on a either a continuous basis to less frequent couple hour schedule. It can be a bit more expensive, particularly with some of the offsite options. However, I would say it's the, kind of the best blend of protecting on-site resources and then meeting those pretty aggressive recovery time, recovery point objectives. So we started off probably 4 or 5 years ago with a solution that used Shadow Protect as the backup software as part of an integrated backup solution appliance. You probably hear it termed BDR. And that worked well for us for a while. Some of the limitations that I think we ran into that was around the retention. So often these BDR appliances will only give you, like a 30-day retention time because it's snapshotting the entire server. It does take up quite a bit of storage space. And so after the 30-day period, it starts deleting, the oldest copy, and then, you got to kind of start over from time to time. So we've switched to a product called Asigra. It's like a software, and it's given us quite a bit more flexibility because we can do full server protection, but then we can have a much more granular retention policies that get applied. So different servers can have different retention policies from whatever, a day, a week, a month, on up to a year or even longer. And instead of being tied to a physical hardware platform, since it's a software-based solution, it's a bit more flexible in terms of how it gets deployed. The other nice thing about the solution that we've implemented with Asigra is that it provides a kind of a built-in business continuity solution in that in the event that there's a complete server failure, we can actually restore the server in our DR, disaster recovery environment, kind of bringing the organization up in our data center and making that data available remotely. So it really benefits the organizations, I would say, because instead of having to kind of pay for and invest in an entire DR environment, which is going to be pretty expensive in the hopes that you never have to use it, we're able to leverage our scale. So we're actively working with over 100 clients, and so you can take advantage of that centralized capacity that we can provide while kind of just having a much lower initial acquisition cost, because you don't need to buy a complete disaster recovery environment. You can leverage the environment that we provide as part of the service. So Asigra has been a great transition for us. The nice thing is it also can back up Salesforce and Google Apps as well. So it can back up both the on-premise environment and some of the cloud services. We should be rolling out Office 365 backups as well later in the year. So that's a pretty exciting thing for us as we see what the kind of what the real needs are for the clients that we serve. We would call our backup a cloud backup. There's lots of cloud backup options. There's no shortage of solutions like Carbonite or Backblaze or CrashPlan or the list goes on. And I would say they can be good for individual solutions, fine for personal solutions, but what we found is that they just kind of don't hold up in terms of being a real true business backup solution. It can be limited by the bandwidth, the type of the data. If all you're backing up is files, you may be fine. But if you're trying to back up databases, Exchange, SQL, it's really kind of weak in terms of, because you're trying to capture multiple gigabyte file and then upload that over a small internet connection. And then in the event of a disaster, if you need to recover more than just a single file, then it often involves shipping something on a disk and then getting that data back and then recovering it from there. And so it can just, the recovery time on that can stretch into the weeks whenever you kind of add up all the different, the chains that have to go along with that. So I think the initial price can be appealing, but if you look at what your business requirements are, it's often not going to meet that, just because the recovery time is going to be so long to restore in the event of a true disaster. So again, kind of buyer beware. It could be good. Personally, I use a cloud backup solution for my personal files, but I'm okay. I kind of know what I'm getting into. So it's important to read the fine print, understand what the service level agreement is, and how quickly you can get that data back. We'll take one of the great changes has been the transition, the advent of these cloud services that often kind of build in a lot of this business continuity and backup solutions that previously organizations kind of had to engineer themselves. And so, for example, Office 365 and Google Apps both have that 99.9% uptime, so about 8 hours of downtime a year. Office 365, they have a designed 2-hour RPO, 4-hour RTO. They have a 30-day recovery window. Google Apps, they're kind of a 0 RPO, 0 RTO, so that things are always being backed up. Data is always available. 30-day recovery. Salesforce, 4-hour RPO, 12-hour RTO. They don't actually offer an SLA. You can try to find it. Obviously, as a cloud service vendor, they want to make sure their data is always available, but it's not kind of written in the contracts. That's kind of something just heads up on, and a 15-day recovery time. So, it's great that this is these are what these vendors are offering now, and so it's important to match that up with what the business requirements are. I would say for a lot of our clients, they're kind of saying, yeah, this is okay. That 30-day recovery time is good enough for now. My sense is that as organizations more fully embrace these cloud services, particularly on the file front, they're going to want to have a second backup copy that they can really kind of control and manage. That's outside of the vendor controlled, kind of putting your eggs all in one basket, so to speak. So again, once you have those business requirements for uptime, retention, RTO, and RPO, then you can make your solution. So for here, the retention period for email is 3 months, and so they went with you're going to need to go with Office 365's E3 platform and implement some of that email retention policies that's not available in E1. So there can be different solutions for different requirements. So don't you don't have to have necessarily a one-size-fits-all backup solution, but just recognize that different solutions they all require different management, contracting, payment, just add some complexity into the mix. So it's important to, I think, map that all out and understand really what you're getting into and what the organization's requirements are. So appreciate all the attention, all the viewers that joined us for this session. Appreciate working with Johan and MAP TechWorks as we put this together, and thank you for your time. I wanted to highlight that we will have an upcoming webinar. We're happy to co-produce our next webinar with N10. We'll be talking about some of those specifics about migrating to the cloud, so Office 365 and Google Apps. I will be joined by our Director of Ongoing Support, Johan, and we'll be really getting into the specifics. We've talked a lot kind of broadly about what the cloud is and all the great things, but for this session we'll actually be kind of lifting the covers and looking under the to see how we're specifically migrating organizations from on-premise environments to the cloud, or in some cases from one cloud to another. So check that out, www.n10.org/events. And again, wanted to thank MAP TechWorks for helping us co-produce this event. So please check them out at maptechworks.org after the session. Once again, would appreciate any comments, feedback, or questions that you may have. Our email and Twitter handles are at the session and will be in the slides, so please feel free to reach out. Thanks. And obviously, if you're watching this or get to this point, you've had the recording, and hope that you found it helpful, and we'll be in touch.